there a public comment for facilities? Any public comment? No? Okay. All right. First up on the agenda is obsolete items for review. At Central Middle School, there's a dryer printer going to public surplus and
Hold on.
scrap.
Hold on, there's number, you missed number 2. Is it
Wait, what?
Market Street's first?
It's not on
It's not on the agenda?
No. First, just says public comment. Is it something we need a copy of?
It's, yeah, it was just, it's on my printed agenda, and all it is just Dr. Price wanted to talk about Market Street sponsored package selection.
Oh, okay.
I think you had talked with him about that. Just take a couple minutes.
Sure.
I could throw some geese talk in there too if you'd like it to me. So what I wanted to discuss was, we had some interest through Market Street to move to the middle school age students. And specifically, it's for orthodontics group. And I believe this is the second orthodontics group that has kind of asked this question, where they want to market more to a certain age. And the experience that Market Street has with this, with other districts, is that they've used the light poles in some of the middle schools thus far, kind of like we have out here already at the high school campus. So they had asked me, would we be open to that? And I said, well, we currently don't have that as one of our inventory in the list. So I said, let me think about maybe a plan of attack for that if we want to expand or not. I said, well, let's give it some time, and you're working on the inventory list that you currently have. And so they came back again and said, this orthodontics group has come back to me again and said, any consideration for this. So this time I listened. I said, give me some more information. And they're asking for light poles in the middle schools. And the incentives would be very similar to the incentives in the high school structure, that inventory list, as far as perks go. The main difference would be some signage in October and in February. One of those is the National Orthodontics Health Month. One is the National Children's Dental Health Month. So they would have signs as a perk during that month outside of the nurse's office perhaps, or maybe in the lobby when you come into the office, something like that. That's the main difference in that type of a proposal. So I guess what I'm asking for tonight is if we're open to expanding to the middle schools in a situation like this, in some of these isolated cases, the board would still see the contract just like they would for a high school structure. And if the need would arise in the future, and if we're getting a lot of interest in other campuses outside of the high school, then we could consider possibly putting together an inventory list just like we did for the high school. But at this point, they're asking if we would consider such a sponsorship for the middle schools in this isolated circumstance. And if we'd be open to such things in the future, then we could look at a possible inventory list if we want to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great idea, and I think it makes a lot of sense. And it makes sense that certain people want to advertise in certain areas where they, like elementary schools, because that's more of where their business comes from. So I think it's a great idea. Is there comments or questions from anybody on the board?
Would we, before they come forth with a contract, would we see, so, I mean, not the whole inventory, I mean, I guess it would be like an inventory list for that. I mean, that's what I would like to see before we get to the contract. Was that supposed to be in the?
So we would have, no, there's nothing that was created because I wouldn't let him go forward with this. But what he did share with me was a sample of one that he put together for another district. And Mrs. Yardley is describing for the board members that weren't here before, we received kind of a little handout, a multiple page handout, where there would be some mock signage where it's like an artist's conception of what a sign would look like on a light pole, an idea of colors and things like that. So they would put together a packet like that with some perks at the back, and we could look at that before it even gets to contract if that's what we wanted to do, yes. It would be very similar to Current package, perks would be a little bit different.
Yeah, I would like to see that before we went to a contract with someone.
Yeah, and I think kind of like before, when we see the first one for a specific item, then if they're going to just duplicate that and change someone's name, you probably don't have to keep them back. But for the first time, I would agree that I would bring that forward and I would share that, that inventory report, I guess we could call it.
Especially because it seems a little bit different than the other ones. The other ones were just, because some of them were in the building, if they were in the gym, right, or in the natatorium, some of those were proposed, but they were just staying the same. I mean, and this is the idea that it's going to be by the nurse's office and it's going to be changing, so I think it's a little bit different than what we've seen for the high school campus. So I think that would be helpful for everybody, especially for people who didn't see the other ones before.
We can absolutely do that, and let me just, since I mentioned that signage, that new perk, I'll just expand that a little bit. I asked, kind of what would that look like if we're going to put a poster up for an orthodontics group in the lobby or near a nurse's office or some kind of high visibility area. And the purpose of it really was about healthy habits. And the sample he showed me was kind of the 5 steps of really about brushing your teeth and so forth. And then at the bottom, there's a little tiny logo of that orthodontics group. So they're paying for these flyers for healthy habits, and then they kind of get their name there as a parent may see that poster. So it's not an intrusive type of thing, but it is different than something we would have done for the high school. But it's customizing a package and making it more attractive to a potential sponsor. So I do agree. I appreciate the support. I think it's worth considering. And I would, at this point, I'll ask Market Street to put together that proposal before we get anywhere near the contract phase, and then I'll share that with the group. Thank you.
Okay, so back to obsolete items. The second one was Grass Elementary. Math textbooks going to public surplus, textbooks going to public surplus. The high school library reading log going to public surplus. Typewriter and chair for scrap, football helmets for public surplus. Technology department has a January recycling lot number 02-07. At South Middle School, portable risers going to public surplus. And at West Rock Hill, digital cameras going to public surplus. Any questions or comments on any of these? Everybody okay with moving these forward? Okay. Okay, the next up is the Away with Geese proposal.
Okay, so Jeff and I reached out to Away with Geese. We got a list of references, and Jeff made contact to a number of people on that reference list. Some we weren't able to contact, but for the people that we were able to contact, for the most part, he received a favorable response as far as the effectiveness of the lights to drive away or move the geese away from the properties. In many of the instances, the folks reported that it seemed like the only negative that was reported back, and it was just, I think, the nature of the instrument is sometimes they would get moved off of a field or away, or somebody moved them to mow the grass or something, and then they didn't get put back, and then all of a sudden they might be missing or something like that. So there would be that seemed to be the only concern that people had, was that every once in a while they just don't get put back in place. So that's the only real issue that we heard from the folks. Other than that, they all seemed to share or hope that they were effective. So we went on the website and went in and entered our addresses for all the buildings, Jeff's building, the high school, middle school, and operations center. And they did a kind of a Google map overview with pictures, and they came up with placements for the lights throughout the property. And their initial, their initial estimate they came back with for the number of lights was about 6 more than what you see here. There were 6 lights that were located in different areas that we felt that we didn't have a problem, and we thought perhaps maybe we could do without those. 3 of them were in the parking lots at the operations center. 2 of them were on the turf field, and the keys do not go on the turf field because it's turf, it's not grass. And then the last one was a placement in the middle of Jeff's parking lot at the operations building. So we took those, asked them to remove those 6 units.
Remove 6, came quoted down to 24 versus the 30.
And the price, you can see listed there, it's about $8,700 for these lights. There is a money-back guarantee that we buy them, and we don't get satisfaction from them, that we can return them. We have to use them for 90 days, give them a 90-day try, and then within the first 180 days, if we don't like them, we can return them. So it does have that guarantee, so that helps with the risk, which is something that we didn't have with the last proposal. They would be placed at various locations. One is in Jeff's pond. I think they're Jeff's pond. Jeff has a big pond.
Canoe.
Yeah, one in the yard over there, your office.
There's 3 on my property. I think there's 4 what they call 2 ponds, and then we have 2 dry ponds. So there's 4 going into those areas. The ones across the street aren't my ponds. Dr. Radigan's ponds. And then it's spread out mostly above the top fields where the kids practice. The 4 people I talked to, maybe the 8, all said right away they had quick response. He's really took off, as Sean said. A lot of landscapers came in. They don't have their own these schools, so landscapers came in, just ran them over, pulled them out, put them down, never replaced them. Some had construction going on, so they had an addition go there and then replace them. But they all initially said it worked very well originally until they got misplaced. So we should be able to control that, I believe.
So,
The only question I have is on the quote. If I read this right, it says if we order more than 6, there's $17 shipping is waived, but yet it's shown in the quote. No, it's not. It's taken out, sorry. My bad. And is there any consideration for, does they call us to receive discounted pricing on the purchase of 6 or more? Does this reflect that discounted pricing, Jeff?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I wasn't sure.
Yes.
and the only thing I was going to add was the timing also. They suggested the timing is really helpful, and we're in a really perfect time frame right now because once they lay eggs, it's more difficult. So if we get them in rather quickly, it's going to be, the guarantee is going to be even more, it's going to be even more guaranteed, I guess, because they're saying that that's the only time that sometimes there's a little bit of an issue is if there's already eggs here and they keep trying to come back for the eggs.
Where
So
they have the babies.
yeah.
Where they make their nests, yeah, which is around the pond.
Jeff's
My
pond.
pond.
Any other questions or comments?
I have one question. I know that they have a money-back guarantee if they don't work. Do the units have any type of warranty on them in case they break?
The units are solar, and I don't know what the warranty is if they break. We also have a 2-year warranty on all parts. I just see that right now, so it's a good thing. Correct on that. The way they're installed too, I was worried about like theft, and they said actually they're anchored in very deep, so when they push them in, they're really quite hard. You can't just run up and grab it and run, so they're buried pretty well too. Another one of my questions was neighbors, are they going to be affected? Mostly at my pond, I have cul-de-sac right on the back side, and They tend to call me about a lot of things. So I was worried about the light in the pond, and they said, no, it's really not visible that way. I think it's more visible for the geese coming in the land.
So when I'm reading the satisfaction guarantee, you have to use it for 90 days, but then they want it back before 180 days. And if the timing isn't quite right when the system gets installed, I mean, is it possible that you could run into a situation where you go over those 180 days? Or no? Think that it could happen? Molting. So I thought, depending on the timing, you might run into a problem where perhaps you wouldn't be able to return it within 180 days. It's a long time, but that was just one thing. And then when they talked about the placement, do they ever have a situation where they make the geese leave your pond, but then the geese decide they like something else on our property? Do they come back to reevaluate?
Well, these 24 cover our property.
Oh, the whole thing,
Yeah.
yeah.
Unless they decide to go on the turf field or the bus lot, which we don't think is going to happen. That's why we eliminated the 6. So it does cover all of our property.
Do they install them?
You know, that's one thing I'm not sure if they do or not, actually. You know?
I assume.
But they did?
We read that we
Yeah.
installed.
Okay.
That we install?
We install.
And we don't have any idea how long these lights last. I looked at their literature and could find nothing that told me anything about that issue.
Again, they're solar lights, but nobody told me that they had problems with lights of 2 years, 5 years, I don't know.
And I think the other thing is the 180 days is if you're not happy, so it doesn't matter, if you're not happy within those 180 days, then you can return it. And that was why I made the comment about the timing being perfect, because we won't even run into those other possibilities if we get them, now, then we wouldn't run into that problem because we'd already have them installed before we would have those other issues. So that would be help. I guess what I'm saying is it would make our 90 to 180 days most effective for that reason, because you wouldn't have to worry about those outside things.
Right, but that's why I would want it to be, if we don't get them, so we don't get them installed at that perfect time, then I kind of would like more